Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. I'm a historical linguist who's worked with many Indo-European languages, both old and modern, that use cases, and I have found that this is often a difficult subject to introduce to English speakers who haven't encountered such languages before. So in this video, what I'd like to do is introduce you to the cases of Indo-European languages, although not all languages use all cases, in a way that uses only examples from English. Now let's talk about what a case is first. A case is the relationship of a noun to the verb in the sentence. So the subject is the thing that is the active participant in the verb. The object, there may be several objects, is the thing that is the recipient of the action of the verb. So any case indicates a relationship to a verb or a relationship of a noun to other nouns. So for example, the genitive case, which indicates possession, the horse's saddle. Horses is genitive, and it is in the genitive case to indicate its relationship to saddle, which is the thing that the horse possesses, or that is at least an attribute of the horse. The reason I'm using examples only from English is that I understand that many people have had a hard time understanding what these noun cases mean, and they want to learn languages that involve these cases, but don't have any kind of background to start with. So the first thing that you need to understand is the difference between subject and object. This is fairly often taught in high schools, but not consistently anymore. The best way to think about this is with an English word like I and me. I go to the store, but you see me. I see you. You go to the store with me. In all of those sentences, I and me refer to the same person, since I'm the one talking, it refers to Jackson Crawford. But I say I if I am the subject, me if if I am the object, then the word that I use is me. So the difference here is that I is the one that is doing the action of the verb. I see, I go. But then it's me if it's not doing the action of the verb. You hit me, you see me, you go with me. In all of those cases, not cases, that's a bad word to use because I'm talking about grammatical case, but in all those instances, then me is not the active participant in the verb. So what this ends up being in a language that uses cases more than English does, because really all that English does is use a subject versus object distinction in some pronouns, I, me, they, them, he, him, she, her. And then we also have a genitive or possessive case. I'll get to that in a minute. But in languages that have more cases than English and use it in more instances and more nouns and pronouns, you've got to understand that basic difference between subject and object. Subject is fundamentally going to be expressed by the nominative case. In languages that have case distinctions, this is going to be the case that you look up nouns in the dictionary in. If you go to an Old Norse dictionary, a Latin dictionary, a German dictionary, a Russian dictionary, and you look up raven, mountain, wind, whatever, the form of that noun that you're going to see is the nominative. Now often the nominative in a case-based language has an ending of its own. So you may have to actually remove that nominative ending before you add the endings of the other cases. And that's why it's important to understand all of the case endings of the language that you particularly want to study. But in any case, although languages are going to have exceptions here and there, certainly my own specialization, Old Norse, is notorious for exceptions to these rules. Nominative is fundamentally going to be the case of the subjects of verbs. So not only I go, but also the raven caws, the wind blows, the snow drifts, the sun shines. In all of those example sentences, the noun that I said is the subject or nominative. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you have one noun in a sentence, 98% chance in any case-based language, that noun is going to be nominative. So the next most common case that you're going to see is accusative. The accusative is the case of the direct object. So this answers the question of what did the subject blank, and blank is the verb. So I see, I is the nominative or subject. What do I see? Well, then that's the accusative. I see a chickadee. Chickadee is accusative. I see an aspen. Aspen is accusative. I see a tree. Tree is accusative. I see a raven. Raven is accusative. I see a cloud. What do you see? A cloud. So cloud is accusative. So in any case, in any instance, in any sentence where you have two nouns, you're probably going to have a nominative and then you're probably going to have an accusative. And note that you can apply these things to English too, even though we're not changing them, right? The wind blows versus I hear the wind. In English, we don't change wind to be nominative or accusative. You can still say that the subject wind, the wind blows, is nominative. I hear the wind, the object wind, that is accusative. So you can still practice these distinctions by making them in English, even though in English no distinction is made between the form of a subject and an object noun. All right. Then we can talk about the genitive. This is actually a case that English robustly maintains. Anytime you add an S to something, as in apostrophe S, possessive S, that is the genitive case. It's the case that indicates possession, ownership of something. So, for instance, you might talk about a cowboy's hat. You might talk about a Viking's axe. You might talk about an actor's sunglasses or anything like that. And all of those examples, cowboys, Vikings, actors, those words are genitive because they indicate possessive. Genitive tends to be the easiest case for English speakers to understand because we still actually absolutely use it. Then there is dative. This is the case of the indirect object. So if I give a book, let's leave aside who I'm giving it to for a moment because that's the dative. If I give a book, I am nominative. Book is accusative because it's the direct object. What am I giving? I'm giving a book. But then to who, I'm not going to say whom because it's an extinct word. To who, that is the dative. So I gave my brother a book. My brother is dative because he's the recipient of the book. He's the one I gave the book to. I gave my students a lecture. Lecture is accusative. My students is dative. I gave a talk to the club. The club is dative. The talk is accusative. So notice in English that the dative can be indicated with that preposition to, but in many languages such as Old Norse or modern Icelandic, the dative can only be indicated by putting a noun into the dative case. You can't say to something, so you have to say the equivalent of I gave my brother the book, not I gave a book to my brother. Now, the dative typically is only going to be present if there's also an accusative. Old Norse and some other languages are exceptions because some verbs actually take a dative direct object, but that's exceptional. Learn the basic rules first. Also keep in mind that now I've talked about the four cases that are in Old Norse or in German or in Old English. If you're studying a Germanic language, you can more or less stop with these four cases. And keep in mind that the dative is the sort of garbage bin case. All of the functions of the cases that I'm going to review next are going to apply primarily to other Old Indo-European languages, not to Germanic languages, and most of those cases are wrapped up into the dative in the Germanic languages, such as Old Norse, German, Old English, Gothic, etc. But let's talk about the four sort of five other cases that you'll find in other Indo-European languages. I'm not going to get into non-Indo-European languages because those are too far outside my specialty. There is the ablative, which indicates the source of something. So, water from the well, a person from Colorado. Then there is instrumental. Instrumental indicates the case of, instrumental is the case of a noun that is a tool. So, I fought with a knife. Knife is instrumental. I wrote with a pen. Pen is instrumental. I recorded with a microphone. Microphone is instrumental. In languages that have instrumental cases, you don't necessarily have to say with. Just like in languages that have instrumental ablative cases, you don't necessarily have to say from. Putting the noun into the case is sufficient to indicate its relationship to the verb and to the other nouns in the sentence. Then there is the locative case. This indicates, as you might guess, location. So the capital of Wyoming is in Cheyenne. My office is on the University of Colorado campus. My favorite places are in the Rocky Mountains. So in those examples, Cheyenne, the Rocky Mountains, the University of Colorado campus, those are all locatives. And in a language with a locative case, like Latin or Sanskrit, you don't have to say in necessarily. You can use the locative to indicate that, just the locative case of Cheyenne or Rocky Mountains or University of Colorado campus, to indicate that that is the location of the thing. Then there is vocative. This is the case for talking directly to a person. So if I shout out, "Hey Papa, watch out," Papa's in the vocative. If I see a stranger coming down the trail and I say, "Hey stranger, howdy," or something like that, stranger is vocative. If a student says, "Hey professor," professor is in the vocative. This is the case for addressing somebody. So many languages that have a vocative case, have a special way of, have a special ending on the noun that is used if you were talking directly to the person indicated by that noun, and that is the vocative case. Then, residually, in some Indo-European languages, there is potentially an allative case, that is a to a place case. So I go home, I go to Wyoming, I go to the park. In those examples, home, to Wyoming, to the park, those are all allatives. And in a language with an allative case, there would be no need for a to. Just like in English, home, when I say I need to go home, home is a residual allative in English. My channel has more than 270 other videos about Norse language, myth, culture, and sagas, and I hope you'll check those out if you're interested in any of those things, as well as some other videos about general linguistics and the history of the Indo-European languages, and how we know languages are related, and things like that. My videos are supported by my Patreon supporters, some of whom are thanked at the end of this video. And that gives the lie to my statement that whom is an extinct word, but in fossilized phrases like some of whom, I think that it does survive a little bit. Anyway, from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.